What's going on, guys? This is the Simple as ABA podcast. My name is Shariq Khan, and today I'm happy to be joined by Chad Favre from Northshore Autism Center. How's it going, Chad?
Good, Shark. Thanks for inviting me to do this. Looking forward to it.
No, likewise, I appreciate you hopping on. I know we've been planning this for a while. For those people who don't know, I'm back in school working on my PhD through Endicott College's PhD in ABA program, and Chad's one of my classmates and cohort mate, whatever you want to call it. So had the pleasure of going through this first semester with them. And you want to just give us a little background info, Chad? A little bit more about like who you are, like what you're currently doing in the field and how you got into it?
Yeah, sure thing. So who I am. I'm a behavior analyst. This is not necessarily in like order of life's priorities or whatever. I'm a husband and a father and a brother and a son and an uncle. And but for these purposes, yeah, I'm a behavior analyst. I was certified in 2008, so that's 14 years I've been a behavior analyst. I got my master's degree at Auburn University and had the pleasure of studying under Dr. Jim Johnston. So that was pretty life-changing. And then went on and worked at a number of places in a number of settings. The first of which was a fellowship. So it was an arranged kind of payback year for our graduate program that was with Georgia's Division of Developmental Disabilities in Atlanta. So from Auburn, my wife and I moved to Atlanta, and I worked with a classmate at Auburn, Clint Trusty, and we were kind of the first BCBAs that they had taken on and part of this statewide initiative to support folks who were being transitioned out of their large state-run institutions. So they were setting up personal care homes and a structure for doing that. I think they were under a bit of pressure from maybe some governmental regulations and whatnot to do that in a certain time period. But we got to do that, and we also got to put together a peer review committee to visit some different regions of the state, which is super cool because we got to essentially contract with Jim Johnston and brought in some other like Merrill Winston and Pat McGreevy, and it was fun just kind of driving around with those guys, visiting different centers and hearing what they had to say and the feedback that they had to give to these institutions or different places we were visiting. But after that, still in Atlanta, I had missed working with the children, which is kind of where my heart was, why I got into the field to begin with. So I did a brief stint at Marcus, and then we were expecting our second child at that point, and decided to move back home to Louisiana, where we were from. I accepted a position with our school system here in Mandeville, which is a suburb of New Orleans, and worked there for 6 years as the lone behavior analyst on a team, a multidisciplinary team designed to address some kind of high intensity behaviors that were happening throughout the district that might not have been mitigated through kind of your tier 2 or approaches or tier 1 approaches to school behavior management, PBS kind of RTI framework there. But through that work, how we were constantly kind of putting out fires, as you say. So coming into a situation where there'd be a child or an adolescent who was engaging in some severe, intense behaviors in a school setting, and it was tough. I constantly tried to focus efforts, when I wasn't doing that, on preventative measures and working in their early childhood classrooms and establishing ways of developing communication in younger children with autism to prevent us from getting to that place of having to put out a fire. But the regulations and red tape kind of got to me after a while. And there are understandable reasons for those types of things within a public school institution, and protecting the taxpayers' money and making sure it's going to, productive ventures. But after 6 years there, I had the opportunity to open Northshore Autism Center with my wife. And get back to kind of early interventions of some of those things that I was trying to do within the school system, but wasn't quite able to control all the variables there. We started our own center, and a place where we could control those variables, started super small, and now we're closing in on our 6th year here. So
Wow, it's amazing. Yeah, and for those who don't know, Jim Johnston's one of like the big OGs of the field. So for
yeah,
anyone
that was
wondering,
I mean, every day I find another reason to be thankful, to have studied under him, and the words that he said are old notes that I've taken have new meaning when I revisit them over and over again, or reread one of his articles, as I kind of gain some experience in the field. I'm able to see those things in a new light, and just the respect for him and what he's done for the field just continues to grow. So
definitely like pioneer trailblazer type for sure. And I
yeah.
think too, what I tell people who are like, not just in ABA, but any sort of like graduate level academia research, that the relationship with the advisor advisee is super important. It can make or break not just your grad school experience, but career after. Like, I'm sure having him as a reference was a big help, and just like for guidance, looking back on those old notes.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting that, I mean, I know you've brought up Hank Schlinger, and you just hear people work that into their vernacular and their conversations, because it really does become a part of you as a behavior analyst, which is really kind of scary to think, like in 15 years, what impact will I have had on people I'm supervising right now, or people that I might get to teach one day. It's just like it's a big responsibility.
I know when we were in class, it was actually yesterday, our professor went, "Oh, you're all going to be doctors in behavior analysis." And that, I don't know about everyone else, but I was like, oh man, he's right.
Yeah,
Just like having a
I'm
frame
kind of
that
like, I hope
way.
so.
I know you had mentioned that I think you just hit year 6 with your company, Northshore Autism Center. How did you guys start it? Because that's, a goal of mine. I know a lot of our colleagues, it's a big thing I hear, where people want to kind of do it the right way and start their own company for whatever reason. It might be like you said, you were having difficulties with the school districts and funding. Some people come from bigger companies and want to, I think you've seen, maybe in your experience, I know in mine, that these companies just pop up different locations as quickly as they can, kind of like a cash grab, and then 5-6 years later they're closing down, and then families are left high and dry.
Yeah, we definitely didn't want to be that. When we first started 6 years ago, I was probably a bit ignorant to the landscape out there of what was going on in ABA, and the mergers that were happening, and acquisitions, and the money that was being generated. I just kind of wanted to do it, like I said, to be able to control some of those variables to help kids at a young age, and impact their lives in a greater way than what I was currently doing. But I remember going to an APBA conference maybe a couple of years ago in Atlanta, and learning about, I mean, it was the topic of a lot of talks and conversations about, how to be acquired, and what a merger looks like. And I was just like, what's happening? I was like, well, everybody's just talking about money, and this is not, like, I came here to learn. I get that it's, the slant of the organization is to be a resource to practitioners and whatnot, but this and it's not a knock on the organization or the conference at all. It was just surprising that there was even content on that. So to bring it back, I guess we didn't know that we didn't want to be that. All that we knew at the time was what we wanted to be, and it kind of started um, as I was working for the school system. I had become a provider for TRICARE, and I was going seeing a couple of clients on the weekends and evenings. I was driving an hour away and doing some in-home stuff, and saw kind of started getting acquainted with what that model might look like and how it might make financial sense as a business, so that I could still like have money and pay a mortgage and send my kids to school and things like that. So then after looking harder at that, and fee schedules and reimbursement rates, and kind of trying to extrapolate at the time what was hypothetical data of what would it look like if we had 4 kids and 4 techs and me and my wife, doing the billing and payroll. Could we get by? Like, can we pay our mortgage? Can we keep the electricity on at a location?
Because at that point,
And
you said you had already had 2 kids, right? So I know that's
yeah,
considered.
yeah, for sure. 2 kids, and then thinking about you know health insurance and things like that. It was a risk, right? And it was scary, and there was a lot of work to be done, and we spent a lot of time there at work, late hours, early morning hours, and whatnot. And eventually, though, I was able to have a small staff, and I was the lone kind of supervising BCBA, and Laurel, my wife, figured out how to get the billing streamlined, and how to do that. She came from a career in the medical field too, so it wasn't all too unfamiliar to her. But I had also, I had done time like consulting at other early intervention clinics, and luckily I had colleagues in the area too. So when establishing Northshore Autism Center, or NAC as we sometimes refer to it, I was able to pick up the phone and or reach out via email and say, hey, can I spend half the day with you, just kind of hanging out, following you around, seeing what your daily schedule looks like, seeing how you structure this thing. How do you put together a comprehensive day of services for a 3-year-old, or a 4-year-old? Or and once we had the loose structure, it was just a matter of kind of trying to standardize what practices I saw in the literature that I knew I wanted to be part of the way that we taught at NAC. Errorless teaching being one of those areas, natural environment teaching, and our prompting methods, and the ways that we use differential reinforcement, and the way that we train staff and continue to monitor treatment fidelity or procedural integrity, using like a behavior skills training approach. So I guess from there, we had rented a building at that point. I had line techs, who I had known from my work in the schools, who came on board, and one of whom is a BCBA now. I just left talking to her downstairs, so that's
Amazing.
super cool.
And line tech, I assume it's like an RBT.
Yeah, so in Louisiana, it's a registered line technician. They don't require them to have an RBT credential, so we just call them line techs, rather than, of course, like misappropriating the trademark copyrighted title of RBT. So, but yeah, had 4 of them, and 3 of them are still here 6 years later as BCBAs. So they eventually, like loved the field, and I supervised their coursework, and it just our client base grew. They finished their grad programs, passed their tests, and then we moved to a bigger location. We had more clients on our waiting list. So now we have four BCBAs, and still keep the caseload super small. We still only have like 15 clients, 15 to 18. And then I act as clinical director now. So my job is to provide our BCBAs the resources that they need, troubleshoot, problem solve, manage our staff, hire staff, train staff, change light bulbs, like I said, that I was doing when you initially reached out to me today, fix toilets, replace the jumping surface on the trampoline, represent our clients who are transitioning to schools in IEP meetings.
True Swiss Army knife, huh?
Yeah, supervise the other candidates that are in programs. I have a separate school consultation that I do on the side, separate supervision outside. So it's lots. I don't know. If I.
No, it's amazing. There's two things I took away from that, but the main one being that to see a small company that still the client base is what I would call on the smaller end, under 20 clients. But the fact that a majority of your opening day line techs are BCBAs now, to see that low turnover rate and to see conversion rate into higher positions, that tells me, one, that the training is top tier, and two, that you have a strong and welcoming work environment that people want to be a part of and progressing. Because I think that's such a big problem in our field that we're always talking about, but we don't see any active measures or procedures to change that, is that we have these techs that are overworked, underpaid, burnt out, and maybe they get into it because they're interested in ABA or they want to pursue a career in it, and a year or two into the line tech work, they're done with it. They're like, oh, I'll go try clinical psych or something different. So you're clearly doing something right, Chad.
Well, thanks. We certainly try, and I agree with all your points. I mean, it's a tough job
Is
to be a line tech. I did that for 4 years before, between undergrad and going to graduate school. Worked as just that, a line tech. It's not easy, and it's sometimes underpaid and undercompensated. But I've always just enjoyed instilling in others like the love that I have for our science, and I think planting that seed is the best way to get established motivation, to where it's something more than money. I mean, to a certain extent, there's not a lot that can be done. I can't pay every line tech $100,000 a year, or like, there are things to be done. I mean, you could, lobbyists and, petition to your congresspersons to raise reimbursement rates and whatnot. So that's great. But at the end of the day, it's always going to be underpaid for the important job that they're doing. So if I can instill a love in the field that leads to enrollment in a graduate program, well, now we have a different source of motivation, and then I can provide the supervision like that we provide is free. I mean, our BCBAs are just staying after work to meet with those in graduate programs, our supervisees, and have them sit in on meetings and participate in assessments and whatnot. So if they show the love and the longevity here, and then we can pay it back with our our experience and expertise, and hopefully provide a quality supervision experience, then I feel that it's mutually beneficial.
No, that's awesome, because I think for those that don't know, manipulating motivation it's an uphill battle, whether it's working with the clients or with staff. So you're, like I said, you're doing something right, man. That's awesome. And
Well, thanks.
the other thing I was going to ask you was, you were talking earlier about like starting the company and the billing and having your wife help. How does that work? I've always wondered, like, does your if you're starting a small company, do you guys approach the school districts and the regional centers and the insurance companies, or do they come to you if you're like, oh, I'm starting a company, we're accepting services, we'd like to accept your insurance? because I think that's a question a lot of people maybe would like a little more info on.
Yeah, so I mean, it might start with trace this back now. I mean, first of all, establishing like a tax ID number, establishing your LLC, and then getting an NPI number to where you can go about becoming credentialed with an insurance company. So it might look like, before Next started, we had already, I'm trying to think how we had, drummed up interest. I think the fact that I had worked for the school system for many years and was the lone behavior analyst for 52 schools, I got to um, interact with lots and lots of special ed teachers and parents. And at the time, I had a mass like group email that went out to all special ed teachers and paras. So I don't know, hundreds and hundreds, maybe 1,000 people, to where I was constantly in contact with them, giving them like these Monday minutes, so little like kind of like behavioral tidbits that they could read in a minute on a Monday to make their week better, right? If you're like a para in a class, a special ed classroom. So through those things, a lot of people would kind of know who I was when I walked into a school. They're like, "Oh, you're Chad. Your Monday minutes. I read those all the time," or things like that. So
So
so when I didn't, that wasn't like on purpose, like, oh, let me get some free PR
yeah,
or marketing. It's just that's how it was. So then when I left, it was like it was more people reaching out to me like, yeah, I hear you're starting your own thing. Like I have this kid that would be perfect for that. So what we would do is get in touch and be like, okay, so what kind of insurance are you or do you have? And then Laurel would set about credentialing me as a provider with that insurance company. So um it wasn't really, yeah, that's how it would work. And then we'd get another kid who was a different insurance company, and Laurel would go through the process of, and that credentialing process that can take like a month or it can take 6 months. So Laurel was just great about just kind of hounding them and making sure, because it's like, hey, we're opening on this day, like we need to be set to go, otherwise our whole kind of financial plan just falls out of line. And then from there, it was just kind of word of mouth. We didn't tell anyone. We still don't. We don't have a sign in front
so
of our
no
building.
no marketing company, no ad.
No, no, no,
Amazing.
nothing. I mean, I built our website. I had no idea how to
No, your
do that.
website's real clean. Actually, I was
It's
looking over it yesterday just to get a little bit
okay.
more info. I was like, oh, well, I
Yeah.
would have thought you hired somebody, or I was like, maybe he knows how to build one.
No, it took me way long. It probably took me 40 hours to do that, whereas someone who knew what they were doing could have probably whipped it up in 2 hours. But I just had to figure that out. And then once word got around, we quickly, had a waiting list. And I'm trying to make sure I'm answering your questions with regards to our school system contract and whatnot. That came, so that's one way that I think really enabled a bit of a safety net, is when I left the school system. So I, they needed my services still, but they knew that I was going to be doing this. So I guaranteed them a certain number of hours of consultation. So I knew that I had that, at least that. And then I could gradually decrease that as my caseload for NAC increased. And that's what happened. And then they reached out later, and now that I have other BCBAs, it's like now I can reopen this consultation avenue again. So, but no, there wasn't any, no marketing. I mean, we're
Nice.
in a different, it depends on your city and your climate and the needs. So at the time, maybe there wasn't, there was one other provider in town. That's it.
And
Since
how big is
so,
your I know you're in a suburb of New Orleans. How big is your town or your general
oh,
like
how many
service area?
people? it would be our parish here in Louisiana. I'm looking it up right now. 269,000 388 people, and I'm sure somebody was just born, so probably 389. But so that's how many people live in our parish. But
But definitely not a small suburb by any means, or like small
no,
service area.
yeah,
Uh,
not like tiny, one red light town or anything. There are, it's as large as what I just said, but there was only one other provider in town. Since then, we've had our, the big companies come in
way in.
and whatnot. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say too with blanking here for a second with the Monday Minute and just the years of being in the school district. Sounds like the ultimate networking. Maybe that wasn't your intention, but I think with most things in any career, I think the best way to network is organically, whether it's like through the work experience and the day-to-day interactions or just the friendships you make along the way, or even now with, I think LinkedIn's a great resource for all that too. But I know that wasn't your original intention, but I think you have a very strong model for people to maybe reference and look back on that. Hey, this job, I might not want to be here long term and start my own thing, but I should try to do my best and get to know people, because I always say you never know who you're going to hire, who's going to hire you, or who could be a reference or lead you to your next job.
Yes, you're yeah, very much correct. There are a number of times where, I may have disagreed with the way that a teacher was going about something, or how a principal wanted to handle something, or had to bite my tongue in an IEP, with 20 people in there or something. But it has panned out. I'm glad, to look back at those times and think, wow, like I'm glad I just kind of played it safe, because I can be, give me in the right crowd, any of us behavior analysts, and we can be somewhat, cocky about our science, and proud,
I think
zealous, and
that's the
spirited.
thing too with we talk about it in class where this our field has this, at times not so good connotation, and I think a lot of it is pride, but it comes off as being brash, cocky, arrogant, and it's a fine line to walk, because
Yeah.
we know how good our science can be for the world and that it works, but the way we come off sometimes, man, I'm like not helping our cause at all.
I know. And ultimately, like what you said reminded me is just that we can have the best science, but we need the opportunity to apply it, right? And that's
Exactly.
based on personal relationship. You can be the best behavior analyst in your tri-state area, but if a parent walks in to meet you for the first time, and you don't put yourself out there in a way that's welcoming and feels safe and collaborative and open to their ideas and with their child's best interests at heart, you're never going to have the opportunity to do what you are so passionate to do. So it's just, yeah, those personal relationships matter a lot, and I was lucky enough to establish a good bit of them in spite of
Absolutely.
myself.
No, for those who don't know, Chad's one of the fan favorites in the cohort,
Am
100%.
I? I had no.
Oh, you
Really?
definitely are. There's times
Okay.
where I won't throw people under the bus, but I'll be having side conversations with someone. I'll be like, oh, Chad's a good guy.
Well, thanks.
I
Thanks.
think
I
it's
try
fun
to.
too. I moved back home like earlier this year, so I was in tri-state area like you said, and now I'm back in Los Angeles. So living at home with my parents, and they'll hear class sometimes, and they'll be like, "Are there any guys in your cohort?" Like I always only hear the girls participate, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, we're definitely outnumbered," but I was like, "You'll
Well,
probably hear Chad or Joe."
yeah.
Sometimes you'll get me and Carlos in there, but
Yeah.
so Chad, one thing I wanted to ask you, because I feel like you have a very unique perspective. You own your own agency and you're a parent. So as you know, the parents, caregivers, whoever it is, are integral part of our services. especially when it comes to generalization or potential generalization.
Mhm.
What are some things you maybe would like parents to know or wish they knew, whether it's like parents looking for services or parents already receiving them, that maybe their own BCBA or own service provider might not be able to tell them for whatever reason?
Huh, that's a good question, Shark. Some things that I will tell parents. So parents will come here, and I they might want to come tour before they get on the waiting list, or and I'm happy to like walk them around and show them what we're doing and talk to them about it and connect them with other resources. Some things that I usually tell them is more uh, I tell them to more things I tell them to be wary of, right? Is like if you go into a place and that you just don't feel right about it, and I know that's super mentalistic, but you don't get a good feeling. Parents,
Like a good vibe from it.
yeah, and another thing, and that can be a multitude of other things. And one thing we try to do here is we have this building, and it looks like a big house. I think it started as like maybe an architecture firm building or something. So it's not. Sometimes parents will talk about, yeah, we came from this place, and it seemed very institutional or whatnot. So I tell them to look for an environment that's going to be comfortable for their child. And then I tell them to look for a place who's open and transparent and who is okay with them coming in at any time. Like there should be, to me, there should just be nothing to hide about, if I'm bringing, I remember like when my kids started daycare, my son, I would just pop in during the day and be like, "Hey, what's up?" And they were cool with it. I'd just be like, "Oh, I missed him." Like, so I was just coming to say hey, and they were good with that. And I think places should be open to them coming in for sure.
And that's what I've told parents too. Like it's a warning sign that like if you're walking in, just popping in, everyone's like kind of straightens up on the fly. That probably means they're dicking around, honestly. Some things
Yeah,
not, are they like on their phones? Are they like not paying attention? But I know in my experience, at least, I've been on both sides where like certain parents come in, you're like, hey, like, how's it going? Shout out Pam and Lori specifically, but there's certain ones that, it's a pleasure to see them. But there's some other ones where it's been like they come in unannounced, which, as you said, you have the right to and you should,
hmm,
because I think it keeps everyone honest. But they start trying to hijack the program, especially when you're in a school. This is more for
yeah,
kids in school districts. At home,
hmm,
I always say like to the parents, ultimately, like we're coming into your home. This is your home. You're gonna make the ultimate call. But if they're like coming into your center or they come into a school and they start trying to hijack things, it can, lead to some potential chaos or issue. But I think as long as there's like an open line of communication, if they have concerns, they should be able to voice them, say like, hey, like I don't think this is, being done the right way, this and that. But I think the problem is once they start trying to get hands-on, it's like a distraction to the other students, the other teachers or paras in the classroom. I think I would argue it interferes with the instructor's instructional control,
Y-
as well as maybe even with the parents. And my
I
one other
agree.
thing, I was just gonna
Yeah.
say the vibe being mentalistic, for the super rigid ones bite me. Like you could definitely put that in a behavior analytic way, but I think that's with anything, Chad. Like you walk in somewhere and the vibe isn't right, like there's probably some sort of extraneous variable in the environment that isn't accounted for, but there's a reason you feel that way.
Yeah, you might not be able to tact it, but you're just like, yeah, you can walk into a restaurant and be like, nah, I don't want that dude touching my food. Or,
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
something that you're seeing that you're just like, no, this isn't gonna be good. Um,
Exactly.
but you're totally right. It can be interfering, for a parent to come in if they have, but I also think that's something that if they want, if they want to continue to be the necessary presence in their child's treatment programs on a long-term basis, it's a skill set that a parent needs to learn as well. You know, like how to come into a situation and just observe and just kind of sit back and trust, and then learn kind of when to ask questions and when not. And I think that's something that, you know, to me, it reminds me of going into a classroom like as a consultant for the first time and learning that, like, ooh, you know, like I can't step on the teacher's toes, and I need to find the right times to mention something or ask a question, and I need to not disrupt all the other students.
And I'm sure as a
But
parent, like, you know, like I was saying, you have that unique perspective. I don't have kids, worked with plenty, but I can't imagine how I would feel if I was receiving services for my child and I like, you know, you see them engage in problem behavior and you feel helpless and you want to step in, but you can't or you shouldn't. But
yeah,
I see both sides for sure. Like I know that there's, you know, everyone just wants best for the child.
yeah. At the end of the day, they're a parent, and that's different. That trumps everything that you're doing. So you
Facts.
just let it go. It's like I get it, man. Like, I mean, there are times where I'm like, I know I'm reinforcing my daughter's behavior or whatever, and I'm just like, I don't care. I just love her. Like,
Like when you
I'm just,
shave the
yeah,
remember you were like, oh, you know,
yeah,
it's like, oh, the mustache looks sick. It's like, oh no, she asked me get rid of it. I
yeah.
do whatever she says.
That's it. It trumps everything, man. That parent love. So, um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
You know, just kind of shifting gears back to you starting knack. Any do's or don'ts or any advice for someone like me or just anyone who wants to start their own company? Because I think you've already kind of, you know, you've given the framework to do it, but maybe some don'ts, like what should people not do when they're starting to or trying to start their own company?
Yeah, I think one would just be doing it too early before you have enough experience to be able to answer your own questions. I think some people right out of the gates, you know, get their BCBA credential and they're like, I'm a BCBA now. I'm ready to do it all. You know, I can open my own agency or business. But I kind of think that getting your BCBA is just the beginning of a new learning experience. I think you need years under your belt before you can open a place. And I say that because I've seen people go out on their own early, and I've seen them not do well by their clients. And you know, their heart was in the right place. They want to do the right thing, but when it comes down to it, they're calling me, or they're calling other people who have a little bit more experience, and they're telling me about the issues, and I'm like, "Ooh, those are just kind of, you know, things that you would have learned that. Give it a year of working under someone, you would have known that, and you wouldn't have had to make that mistake. So I think jumping in too early is one thing that I would warn against when starting. And then growing too fast is an easy one, and which goes hand in hand with not being able to say no. Right? I've been there before, to where it's like, can you help my child? Can we need this? And I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. Like, we'll figure this out. But at some point you have to draw a line, otherwise you'll work yourself into the ground, you'll water down the quality of your services, you'll damage your own reputation and that of your business. So I think keeping a small caseload, I like, when I was the lone BCBA, I want to know, you know, what days grandma's picking up, what days grandpa's coming, like what kind of car stepdad drives, when sister's birthday is, when does the Miracle League soccer program start, you know, like, when's, like, why doesn't he like the toasted Cheez-Its anymore, you know, like, he got a new pair of shoes. I want to know, like, all that stuff. And if you have 15 kids on your caseload, you can't keep that stuff straight. So I think keeping small, manageable caseloads, so that you can really get to know the parents and the families. Which brings me back to a point I forgot to make, is that something I wish parents knew when they're looking to receive services is how
Uh-huh.
important they are. like how the magnitude of the role that they're going to play in their child's success. And I think so, backing it up, keeping that small caseload gives you that ability to have a relationship with the parent to where you can really build on that, let them know how important they are to their child's progress.
No, I appreciate all that. And it's like I said too, you just kind of touched on it, there's nothing without the parents. It's like it's a team, the service providers, the child themselves, the parents, teachers, paras, but
Yep.
also with the little extraneous, I don't know if I'd call them extraneous variables, but all the little things you noted, like, sister's birthday, the new shoes, why doesn't he like this? I think those are things we maybe push under the rug at times, or don't acknowledge, like, oh, that can't affect his behavior. But as you and I know, anything in the environment can. Um, so really appreciate that too. The one thing I wanted to ask you next is you were talking about, as a new BCBA, don't just jump straight into trying to conquer the world, like, let me start my own company, this and that. Taking the time to work as a BCBA, supervising a caseload, training staff. Do you have any other advice for like newly minted BCBAs?
I've seen so I think if you're coming out and you make a wise decision of so I just got my BCBA, I want to work in field of early intervention or school consultation or whatever it is, and you know that you want to work in a situation where you have some mentorship available to you, like some more senior BCBAs there that you can ask questions to. Great. There are, however, some companies, and you touched on this earlier, and there are, and I did too. I mean, there's big money to be made in this field right now, and I think there are companies that are owned by who knows who, pots of money, investors, equity firms, such that the person at the helm is detached from the ethical responsibilities that you have as a BCBA. So that's my main like word of caution, I guess, to a newly minted BCBA is I there's no other way to say this. I think you should work for a company who is owned and operated by a behavior analyst, or at least has one as a main part of the managerial team, to make sure that you're not inadvertently putting yourself into ethical quagmires on a daily basis and getting yourself into trouble, or overworking yourself, or even just establishing an experience that is foundational for you, that you think should be the norm, right? If your first job out is like caseload of 20 kids, you're just churning out VB maps and cookie cutter programs, and you're hitting them all for an hour a day and never really talking to parents, you start to, and if you establish a reinforcement history of that, because CEO person is paying you well for maintaining this, well, all of a sudden you think that's what it means to be a good BCBA, right? And that's scary for our field.
I think if that's a really good point, especially the one that there is money to be made. Because I think I say it a lot, I'm like, there's no money in this field, but that's more of like the lower entry level positions. But if you're the one running the show, there is money to be made for sure. But once it, like you said, if there's just some silent investor who doesn't even know what ABA stands for, writing your checks and overworking you, like, it's hard to say no when that check looks half decent and you were working for minimum wage as a line tech for 6 years.
Yeah,
It's tough, man.
yeah, it's not, I understand
I
why,
do too. When you're making such little money and then someone's
yep,
writing you a life-changing check, but they might be calling, I would argue they're definitely calling shots that are putting the profit or margins ahead of changing someone's behavior for the better.
yep. And it might be for the best of reasons. It's not always that some person driving a Porsche or whatever, and who doesn't care about kids. It might be very, very well-meaning retired teacher or parents of a child who successfully, you know, went through an ABA program and is now, you know, living on his own, and they want to give back. But it, so it's not due to malicious intent, but it's just due to an ignorance. It's that you just don't
100%.
know. You don't know what's going on down there at the level of the BCBA when you're making these decisions that impact the services, and that could put a BCBA in a tough spot.
No, absolutely. And it's, you know, I think you made a good point too, that everyone wants the best for the kid, but you know, the understanding of the interventions and the, you know, even the way the company is like being run, because maybe they come from like a business background, which, you know, I think we probably need more of at the
Yeah.
administrative level for sure. Um, but I think our field's also doing a good job of moving into this multidisciplinary approach that can maybe help us grow for the better.
Yeah,
And
we don't know a thing about business. I mean, unless you started off in business, or that was definitely a I knew nothing about not nothing, but very little about
uh,
managing a business, and that was definitely a learning curve here, making sure that we can keep the lights on and whatnot. But it's still secondary to what we're doing clinically. At the end of the day, I don't care about anything other than the outcome for our clients. And sometimes the outcome for our clients is hinged to us being able to have electricity. But
yeah,
but that's the most important thing. So to every extent possible, that's where we keep our focus.
yeah. And I think people like you with that ultimate goal of just making socially significant behavior change, people like you are the ones that need to be running the show at these companies, because you, the intent is there, and the
Hmm.
like overall goal for the company. You know, it's like you said, you know, got to be able to pay your staff and got to be able to keep the lights on in the building, but the goal should always remain the same.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then,
I think
oh no, go ahead.
no, sometimes that means just kind of making sacrifices and just altering your plan and your life goals and whatever for different kinds of reinforcers out there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Which I kind of wanted to that segues perfectly into the little last topic I wanted to get into with you before the Q&As, that you know, we've talked that you're into recording music, like you said at the beginning, you're a husband, father, son, etc. You're in a PhD program. uh I guess just any advice for not just graduate students but anyone in the field maintaining a work-life balance, because you, we haven't had a chance to talk too much outside of class, but you remind me a lot of myself in the sense of you strive for that balance, and I have been applauded for it at times, and I've been criticized for it for having a balance. But the longer I've been in this field, the more I prioritize my mental health, my work-life balance. And I'll be the first to say that I think early on, if you're getting into this field and you want to go master's or PhD level, you're going to have to grind your ass off. And there's going to be a lot of late nights, a lot of not seeing your friends, not sleeping a lot, getting your ass literally kicked at work. But I think once you've paid your dues, and that is subjective, you should be able to afford yourself a work-life balance. So anytime I see someone that I can assume has that, I like to see how they do it too.
That's it's so important. And huh,
I know it's a
the way
loaded
that
question, but
no, it's hard is all I'll say. And I have a great like supportive family who deals with me kind of being in the office a whole lot, at home or at work. But as far as balance, I mean, there are things that slip. You know, I've always been a runner, not always, but maybe 20 years been a runner, and that has slipped a bit. It might mean like going from training for a marathon to like a half marathon, or I like doing these hiking trips with some buddies. So we usually go twice a year to some destination. We'll go backpacking and
You and I still have to plan because I do that once a year with
yeah.
a friend of mine who's also BCBA.
Oh,
It
that's
was a
awesome.
once a year thing he got me into as well. And
Yeah.
that's one of my outlets too, the just getting outdoors, um, challenging yourself in a way that isn't academic.
Yeah, that's where I find my zen is if I can physically challenge myself to a place to where I can stop thinking. Um, that's what it feels like, almost like a meditative state. Just experiencing that for an hour is
Mhm.
therapeutic. It will last for a week. And one of these hiking trips, if I can pull that off, like 5 days in the mountains, and
Oh wow, nice.
like no phone, and just kind of sleeping on the ground, and walking,
Truly
then that'll
disconnecting from
yeah,
everything. Yeah.
that'll last me a good 6 months. But regarding balance, that trip might just have to, I might have only one trip this year instead of two. I might not be able to record as many songs, but I still do, get together once a month with some guys. We play music. Have I'm getting together with a friend this weekend to record some more music as well. So
Awesome.
finding those little times. Um, I don't know how it's working. We'll see if it works. I mean, we'll see if this program pans out. So far, so good, but we're only in like what, a couple months now.
I think
So this balance,
week 10, I
yeah,
think they said yesterday.
yeah, the balance might go down the tubes, or it might be unsuccessful, but it's not for lack of trying. So I tell my staff the same thing. I'm like, man, if you just need a day or just a break in the middle of the day, just do it. Like, I'd rather you do that than have a breakdown.
I've
Just let
told
me
people
know. Like,
that too. Like if
yeah,
you need a mental health day, it's better that than you bringing your baggage into work and it takes a toll on the family and you don't even realize because maybe you're not paying attention and kid starts engaging in problem behavior because you were off thinking about other things. And I get it. I've been there, but it's better just call out, just save everyone the trouble. But I
yep,
think it's so frowned upon. It's like, oh no, like it needs me. It's like, yeah, but if you can't put on your game face and be 100% when you walk in the door for session, don't come.
right.
That's my opinion, at least. I don't know where you stand on that, but
I'm the same. My one caveat is just like, plan it. If you know things are getting stretched, just tell me, like, you know what, next Friday I'm gonna head out early. I'm going to do a 3 day weekend. As opposed to like you wake up and you're like, I can't do it today. So
yep.
it's like let's do this on the antecedent side of things. Let's do it as a
Like if
preventative strategy.
you
Strategy.
feel it coming on, like like you said,
Yeah.
take the
Identify your
corrective
precursors.
approach.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how.
Going back to what
Yeah.
I said though, like when you have like a good work environment and that communication's available, where I can go to my clinical director and tell him like, hey, like it's Monday, like this Friday, I think I'm gonna need to take an early weekend, But like, I'm sure you've experienced it too. I've been in companies where I can't go up to my clinical director and
Right.
ask for that. But I've also been at some where I can be transparent and say like, hey, I'm gonna need that extra day off, and hey, no problem.
Yep, I think that's something that we pride ourselves in as well, is just being this family-owned company. We have 25 employees or so. I always tell them, just come talk to me. Like, we don't have to pass this stuff by a board or something like that. Just talk to me. I'll open up the document that says policies and procedures, and we'll develop something that's for the good. If this is going to be something that's good long term, then we'll draft this up, bounce this off the other employees. If we all think it's a good idea, let's do it. That sounds great. And I tell them that's how they build who we are. Much of who we are now has been built by awesome suggestions from great, like, staff persons. So it's an advantage to being a small company. I like that a lot.
Awesome. last thing I usually do with people when they hop on the Potter is just quick little Q&A. I have two pretty good questions, actually. One, I think we kind of touched on. I think you actually touched on both a little bit indirectly, but Ham, the first one is Ham wants to know, do you have a policy or moral integrity to the amount of hours a BCBA should oversee a case? And I think she means like that, like a minimum amount of hours they should be there each month or each week.
Yeah, so I based that on the BACB's document. It was like a guidance for treatment in autism spectrum disorders that where they suggest 20% of the hours of service that are provided be supervised
So
by
the
a
board does
BCBA.
have something like that because I've been asked and I wasn't clear on if they do. So they have
Yeah,
a recommendation.
they do. They have it's a document that they put out because I cite it in all of our treatment plans to make sure that insurance companies have a citation that I'm referencing as to who is suggesting 20%. And that's for comprehensive treatment models. So for a focused treatment model, it's I think a minimum of 2 hours a week. So in the way that I'm not requiring them to do that. I guess I manage that by keeping their caseload super small, right? So if their caseload is 6 kids and the kids each come for 30 hours a week, that's 180 hours of service that's being delivered. So they can adjust their supervision as needed per case. So usually it probably wouldn't even be that if I were to say 6 kids 30 hours a week, 180 hours, that's 18 hours would be 10%, so 36 hours would be 20%, which would kind of be a lot. That's You're looking at 7 hours a day of supervision. Even that, I mean, that's a full work week, but I know that they have other indirect tasks to do. So I don't like we don't do the quota thing, like you got to hit this many number of hours.
Just on a case
It's
by case basis, it sounds
Yeah,
like. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm not gonna if people are putting in a full work week, you're doing what you can. Maybe it's that we need to decrease your caseload size so that you have more time to,
That's a good point.
you know, and that's fine. Let's do that. Again, that's one of those things where I can just be like, that's cool. Like, we'll just move this kid over to somebody else so that you can have more time.
Awesome.
Especially now, or if things are tough and we're trying a feeding program or something that needs to be uh, supervised more than what was originally planned. Let's submit for that. Let's get that approved so you can do that. So
No, I
it's
think
a
that's
good question.
yeah,
Yeah.
no. This was actually she was on episode 1, so she always has real good questions. And then last one, it's 2, but I'll put them in one. Alec wants to know how many employees, BCBAs, techs, other do you have at the company, and then how many clients. But I think you had said earlier how many clients, but I think he just wants like a kind of like the number of staff too that
Yeah.
composed of.
So we have we have 18 line technicians. We have 4 BCBAs, 1 clinical director, myself, 1 office director, my wife, and we have 15 clients plus 3 that come only for our social skills session.
Okay.
Which is just 4 hours a week in the afternoon. So those are some kids that are a bit older, kids that we've transitioned from our clinical services into schools, where we then go, which is a whole nother topic, which is a hefty topic about transitioning from clinical to school-based services and what the laws might look like in different states, because we're able to do that here. So we go provide services in the public schools and gradually fade our services until they're successful. And then those kids will come to those social skills sessions. So about 18, to answer the question, 18 clients, 18 line techs, 4 BCBAs, a clinical director, and the office manager. That's a kind of our size.
Pretty good ratio of techs to clients and BCBAs to techs.
Mm-hmm. It works. Yeah. It works right now. Texts are, it's always hard to find quality text. We sometimes get in the weeds a little bit with that, but we're at a good place right now.
Definitely, I think a lot of people go through that. But
Yeah.
uh, Chad, I think that's all I have for you, man. Just wanted to say thanks again for coming on. And if you want to, plug NAC or, your band, anything you want to
Yeah.
shout out, by all means, floor is yours.
No plugs necessary. I appreciate the opportunity, Shark. Yeah, this was cool. If you ever want to have me on again or
100%.
whatever.
There was a lot of rabbit holes I wanted to go down, and I was like,
Yeah.
I'll spare them, just bring them back for part 2.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
I'll definitely, for anyone who's listening that might be in the Mandeville or, Louisiana area, I'll plug the website, so they can find you if interested. And yeah, man, it was a pleasure and really appreciate it. So
Yeah, man.
yeah, that'll do it for episode 3 of the Simple as ABA podcast. My name is Shariq, and appreciate you guys listening. So just make sure you subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and yeah, we'll see you guys soon. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Cool.